I want you to picture an elderly man.
Okay.
He's in his 70s, his body is failing him, and all of his earlier kind of radical utopian dreams, they've just been thoroughly shattered.
Right, by decades of war and political disaster.
Exactly, and personal heartbreak, too. So he's sitting there alone, painstakingly scribbling these laws, just thousands and thousands of meticulous granular laws into heavy wax tablets.
It's a striking image, yeah.
And the manuscript he's working on is so massive, I mean, it's so sprawling and ultimately unfinished, that after he dies, his student, Philip of Opus, has to spend this unimaginable amount of time just transcribing it.
Just so it isn't lost to history.
Right. And this isn't the idealistic, fiery Plato who wrote the Republic.
No, definitely not.
The young guy who thought you could breed a perfect society of philosopher kings, he's just gone. This is a man who has seen his home city crushed by war, who survived the brutal rule of oligarchs, and who is now grappling with the very gritty, very disappointing reality of human nature.
He's seen the dark side of it all.
Yeah. So today in our deep dives, we're looking at his final, his longest, and honestly his most pragmatic work, which is the Laws.
It really is a fascinating shift in his thinking.
It is, and we're drawing from a really massive stack of research today. We've got historical context, linguistic analysis, and even comparative biblical theology, all to understand a universal problem that this elderly Plato was trying to solve.
Which is essentially how to build a functional society.
Right. How do you build a just society without completely crushing the human spirit? How do you create laws that don't just command the body, but actually, persuade the mind?
It's a remarkable premise to start with because it really captures the diagnostic landscape of this text. I mean, the Laws is so often overshadowed by the Republic.
Oh, for sure. Everyone reads the Republic in college.
Exactly. But the Laws is arguably a much more mature, realistic attempt at governance. The Plato we see here is retreating from utopia.
He's tired.
He is. He's wading into the muddy waters of actual human behavior. And he's doing it by creating a massive architectural blueprint for a city that, well, doesn't even exist yet.
Which is wild.
Right. But to understand the sheer scale of what he's attempting, we really have to look at how he sets the stage. The literary framing of this book is just entirely unique.
Right, because unlike those, rapid-fire aggressive debates you usually see in Platonic dialogues.
The ones where Socrates is just dismantling someone.
Yeah, exactly. This one is a slow burn. It's set between 360 and 347 BC, and it involves these three elderly men taking a long, really leisurely summer walk.
On the island of Crete.
Right. They are walking from the ancient city of Knossos all the way up to the cave of Zeus on Mount Ida.
And the geography there is vital. I mean, it's the height of summer in the Mediterranean.
It's sweltering.
It's incredibly hot. So the text actually mentions them stopping repeatedly to rest in the shade of cypress trees.
Just to catch their breath.
Yeah, and it gives the entire dialogue this ruminative, almost exhausted pacing. These aren't young hotheads yelling at each other in an Athenian marketplace anymore.
No, these are guys with bad knees.
Right. These are men at the end of their lives reflecting on the rise and fall of civilizations. And we have three characters here. We have Cleinias, who is a Cretan, Megillus, a Spartan, and an anonymous Athenian stranger.
Who is essentially the stand-in for Plato himself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He carries the philosophical weight of the text.
But I want to pause on those nationalities for a second because they aren't random, right? I mean, Sparta and Crete were famous in the ancient world for one thing above all else.
Military discipline.
Yes. They were warrior culture.
Exactly. Or, well, to avoid simply agreeing with you, I should say their entire constitutional framework was built around a singular virtue, which was courage in war.
Right.
The Spartan and the Cretan, they believe that the fundamental purpose of any law code is to prepare a society to survive conflict. They view peace merely as this, temporary pause between inevitable wars.
So Plato, acting through this Athenian stranger, is walking with two guys who view the entire world as one giant military boot camp.
Basically, yes.
And what's the actual premise of their conversation? I mean, why are they talking about laws at all?
Well, Cleinias mentions that he's been tasked by the Gnossians to help establish a brand new hypothetical colony on the island.
Which they decide to call Magnesia.
Right. And as they walk, they decide to pass the time by verbally constructing the entire legal and social framework for this new city, literally from scratch.
Just a casual summer stroll activity.
Just light banter for ancient philosophers.
Yeah.
But the Magnesia they design is a shock to anyone who has only read the Republic.
Oh, complete shock.
Because the Republic was this radical vision where Plato wanted to abolish private property, dismantle the nuclear family,
and institute state-run breeding programs, right?
yes, to produce the best possible citizens. It was a complete disruption of natural human bonds.
Which honestly just sounds like a nightmare. I mean, it always sounded to me like a 20-something Silicon Valley tech bro wanting to, disrupt human relationships.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Right, like moving everyone into a hyper-optimized, cashless polycule or something. It's just incredibly arrogant.
It was the arrogance of purely theoretical philosophy. He hadn't tested it against reality. But the trauma of history intervened.
Right, reality hit him hard.
Exactly. Because between the Republic and the laws, Athens suffered the catastrophic Sicilian expedition, which basically decimated their fleet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then they lost the Peloponnesian War to Sparta. They endured the horrific rule of the 30 tyrants.
Which was what, a bloodthirsty oligarchy installed by Sparta?
Yes, a regime that executed wealthy citizens, stole property, and instituted a complete reign of terror. And to make matters worse for Plato personally, his own relatives, Critias and Charmides, were among the leaders of those tyrants.
Man, that is some heavy historical baggage. I mean, he watched his own family members participate in a regime that murdered people in the streets.
He did. And it left a deep scar. And then, when democracy was finally restored, that newly democratic Athens turned around and executed his beloved teacher, Socrates.
Right. The ultimate betrayal.
So you can see why the utopianism was just burned right out of him. In the laws, he explicitly calls Magnesia a second-best city.
Wow, second best. That's a huge concession for a philosopher.
It is a profound concession. He accepts that you just cannot abolish ordinary social bonds like marriage and private property without inviting disaster. You have to work with human selfishness, not pretend you can erase it.
But, and this is what's so fascinating, his way of dealing with that selfishness isn't just throwing his hands up. He doesn't say, okay, let people do what they want.
No.
He goes in the complete opposite direction. He tries to micromanage the selfishness through this insanely exhaustive legal structure.
He becomes obsessed with the details.
Yes. My favorite detail from the research is the mathematics of Magnesia. He insists that the colony must be located at least 10 miles inland from the sea to avoid the, quote, moral corruption of naval commerce.
Right, keep them away from the sailors and the merchants.
And then he fixes the population of the city at exactly 5,040 households.
Yes.
Not 5,000, not around 5,000. Exactly 5,040. Why? Why that specific number?
Because 5,040 is a mathematical marvel for an urban planner.
Really?
Oh, yeah. It is a highly composite number. It can be divided by all the numbers from 1 to 12, except 11.
Wait, really?
Yes. And even then, it's divisible by 11 if you simply temporarily deduct 2 families from the count.
So it's basically the ultimate number for a bureaucrat who loves spreadsheets.
Exactly. Well, to put it more academically, it allows the lawgiver to distribute land, organize military units, collect taxes, and divide civic tribes into fractions with absolute unbroken precision.
No messy remainders.
Exactly. You never have a remainder. You never have a dispute over, a fraction of a parcel of land. It's rationalist utopian planning.
It feels a bit like a guy who realized he can't control human nature, so instead he's going to obsessively control the zoning permits and the property lines.
That's a great way to frame it.
It's an attempt to impose mathematical order on the total chaos of human relationships.
It is a profound psychological pivot, and it's entirely unique when we look at the broader ancient Near East.
How so?
Well, if we analyze Hammurabi's code, or the Hittite and the Syrian legal collections, those are all reactive.
Right. They're dealing with stuff that already happened.
Exactly. They were royal pronouncements dealing with existing messy populations. They're essentially collections of case law. If a man steals an ox, this is the penalty.
If a guy builds a house and it falls down, that kind of thing.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But Plato's doing something completely original here. He treats law-giving as reasoned architecture for a community that doesn't even exist yet. It is a proactive blueprint.
Okay, but looking at this blueprint, I have to point out the elephant in the room. Or I guess the elephant that isn't in the room.
Yes.
This is a Platonic dialogue. Where on earth is Socrates? I mean, Socrates is the face of Plato's entire philosophical project. He's the guy who usually corners people in the market and dismantles their arguments until they look foolish. But in the laws, he is entirely erased.
He is. It is the only Platonic dialogue where Socrates is completely absent.
Which is crazy to think about.
It is, and scholars have spent centuries arguing over why. But the research points to a deep, tragic, literary, and historical irony that explains his absence perfectly.
You're going to have to break that down for me, because erasing your mentor from your absolute magnum opus seems like a massive betrayal unless there's a very specific, unavoidable reason for it.
Well, think about why Socrates was executed in the first place.
Right. An Athenian jury condemned him on charges of impiety and corrupting the youth.
Exactly. He was viewed as a subversive who didn't respect the gods of the state. He was a threat to the established order.
Yeah.
Now, flash forward to Book 10 of the Laws. The Athenian Stranger, who we established is Plato's stand-in, constructs an incredibly detailed theology for Magnesia. And he mandates that if any citizen denies the existence of the gods or believes the gods can be bribed by sacrifices, they are guilty of impiety.
And what's the penalty in Magnesia for impiety?
Capital punishment.
Oh, wow.
Yes. The city of Magnesia culminates in state-enforced religious orthodoxy.
So the tragic irony is
That if Socrates lived in Magnesia, the very legal code that Plato is writing would have required his execution.
Man, that is dark.
Right. Socrates, the ultimate questioner, the gadfly who annoyed the establishment by challenging their certainties, would be an atrocious spokesman for a city that ultimately relies on the threat of death to enforce theological conformity.
Because he would just be questioning the Athenian stranger the whole time.
He would dismantle the laws.
Yeah.
Plato simply cannot have Socrates architect a city that would inevitably put him to death. So he has to invent the anonymous Athenian stranger.
That casts a really dark, heavy shadow over the whole text. I mean, it makes the melancholy of those three old men resting under the cypress trees makes so much more sense.
It really does.
It's not just the heat of the day making them tired. It's the exhaustion of a man who realizes that to build a stable society, he might have to theoretically execute his own best friend.
That's a profound way to look at it. The text operates much more like wisdom literature, akin to the Book of Ecclesiastes, honestly, than a fiery philosophical debate.
It's world-weary.
Very much so. The Athenian actually makes a poignant remark midway through their walk. He says that human affairs aren't really worth taking very seriously, but that we must take them seriously anyway because we are caught up in them.
I highlighted that exact quote when I was reviewing the notes. It's incredibly relatable.
Right?
I mean, for you listening, think about how your own ideals have shifted as you've gained more life experience. When you're young, every political argument feels like life or death. Every ideology is going to save the world. You have that Socratic fire.
You're ready to burn the system down.
Exactly. But then you get older, you see regimes change, you see corruption, you see the limitations of actual people, and you realize it's all flawed. But you still have to pay your taxes, you still have to build schools, you still have to try and maintain order.
You still have to live in the world. And that resignation is why the Athenian stranger pushes back so hard against Megillus and Cleinias. Remember, they think the purpose of law is just military courage.
Right. Just survive the next war.
But the Athenian counters that courage is actually the least significant of the four cardinal virtues. A society built only for war is a society destined to destroy itself.
Which Sparta eventually did.
Exactly. He wants to weave in justice, wisdom, and temperance. He wants a city that knows how to live in peace. But the challenge he faces is monumental. If he can't rely on the utopian idealism of the Republic, and he has to manage these flawed, selfish human beings in Magnesia, how does he actually get them to obey these laws?
Right, because nobody likes a micromanager, and a guy who limits your city to exactly 5,040 households is the ultimate micromanager. Yeah. If he just uses a stick, people will rebel. And this brings us to what I think is the most mind-blowing part of the laws. He invents a completely new mechanism for governance.
It is arguably his greatest contribution to legal theory. In books 4 and 5, Plato introduces the concept of the proemia.
Which translates to what?
The persuasive preludes.
Okay.
His groundbreaking innovation is the idea that laws must philosophically persuade a citizen's mind before they command the citizen's body.
I need us to really dig into this because this concept completely shifted how I view our own modern legal system. He contrasts two ideas, right? The simple law and the double law.
Yes.
So a simple law is what every society is basically used to. It's a bare command attached to a penalty. Like the speed limit is 65. If you go 80, you pay a $200 fine.
Right.
Or in the context of Magnesia, marry by the age of 35 or pay a yearly fine and lose your civic privileges. It's entirely binary. Comply or suffer.
Yes. The simple law operates purely on the axis of force.
Yeah.
There's no negotiation. But the double law adds a philosophical preamble. It explains the why before it demands the what. So using the marriage law as an example, the double law wouldn't just issue a fine. It would begin with an extended reflection on human mortality.
It gets deep.
Very deep. It would argue that the human race partakes of immortality by leaving children behind to continue the species, and that to voluntarily deprive yourself of this gift is to isolate yourself from the eternal continuity of nature.
Wow.
And then, therefore, having understood this cosmic truth, you must marry by 35.
That is quite the preamble. To illustrate this, the source material brings up this incredible analogy from the text about ancient medicine. I love this. Plato talks about two different types of doctors. You have the slave doctor and the free doctor.
The slave doctor is such a fascinating historical detail.
Yeah.
In ancient Greece, doctors often had assistants, sometimes slaves themselves, who would treat other slaves. And the slave doctor works in the dispensaries. He runs frantically from bed to bed. He doesn't talk to the patients. He doesn't take a holistic history of their lifestyle or their diet. He just looks at the symptoms, issues a dictatorial order based on a rule of thumb, hands them a medicine, and runs to the next patient.
It is pure force and compliance.
Exactly. There's no conversation.
Which I think we've all had a modern doctor's appointment that felt exactly like that.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, you get 7 minutes, a prescription, and the door hits you on the way out. But the free doctor who treats free citizens operates on a completely different paradigm.
He does. The free doctor sits with the patient. He converses with the patient's family. He learns about the history of the disorder, the patient's habits, their environment.
He actually listens.
He listens.
Yeah.
And crucially, he doesn't prescribe a single drop of medicine until he has philosophically persuaded the patient that this treatment is the right course of action. He brings the patient into the healing process as a willing participant.
That is so key.
Once the patient's mind gives internal assent, then the physical treatment begins.
And Plato says the legislator, the lawmaker, has to act like the free doctor, not the slave doctor.
Precisely.
If you just treat citizens like slaves and bark orders at them, you breed fearful resentment. I mean, they might obey you while you're looking, but the second the state turns its back, they will break the law because they hate the authority that issued it.
Human nature 101.
Right. But if you give them the preamble, if you persuade their reason, you breed true civic harmony.
We truly cannot overstate how radical this was for the time. In earlier Greek literature, or in the sweeping legal codes of the ancient Near East we mentioned earlier, this concept just does not exist.
It's nowhere.
Nowhere. Laws were the unquestionable will of the gods or the king. They were handed down from above to be obeyed by those below. The idea that a government actually owes its citizens a philosophical rationale for its laws is a massive leap forward in the conception of human dignity.
It really is.
It assumes the citizen is a rational creature capable of understanding the good, not just an animal to be herded.
It's the difference between, a mechanic who just hands you a $2,000 bill and says pay up versus a mechanic who brings you into the garage, points a flashlight at your engine, shows you the correct timing belt, and explains the physics of what will happen if it snaps on the highway.
That is an excellent modern equivalent.
Because in both scenarios, you're paying the $2,000. But in the second scenario, you're actually grateful for it because your mind has been persuaded of the necessity.
The action is the same, but the internal disposition of the citizen is completely transformed. But what's truly astonishing about the laws is that Plato doesn't just describe this shift from persuasion to command in theory.
What do you mean?
He actually weaves it into the physical grammar of the Greek text itself.
Okay, this is where I need you to play the role of the free doctor and explain the academic jargon to me.
I will do my best.
Because the research notes talk about something called systemic functional linguistics, or SFL, and I'm going to admit that sounds like a graduate-level linguistics seminar, and I have no idea how grammar is supposed to change a citizen's mind. Break that down for me.
It sounds intimidating, but the core concept is quite intuitive. Systemic functional linguistics is a way of analyzing a text by looking at how language is used to accomplish specific social goals.
Okay.
We look at transitivity patterns, which is just a fancy way of asking, what kinds of verbs is the author choosing? What is the grammar actually doing to the reader?
Okay, so how does Plato use verbs differently in the preludes versus the actual laws?
When the Athenian Stranger is delivering the persuasive preludes, the text is heavily dominated by what linguists call mental and relational processes.
Like what?
He uses verbs of thinking, believing, perceiving, and understanding. Furthermore, the modality, the level of certainty in the language is deliberately low.
So he's not barking orders.
Exactly. He uses hedged, tentative phrasing. He'll say things like, let us consider, or would it not seem to be the case, or perhaps we should examine.
He's inviting them into a conversation. He's not lecturing them. He's walking alongside them, cognitively speaking.
Exactly. He is creating a shared cognitive space. The grammar itself is an act of philosophical friendship.
Wow.
But once that prelude concludes, and he pivots to issuing the actual legal statute, the grammar violently shifts.
Oh, really?
The mental verbs vanish. The text is suddenly dominated by material and directive processes. The modality shifts from low certainty inquiry to high certainty imperatives.
So it goes from let us consider to
The city shall do this. The guardians must enforce that. The penalty shall be death.
that is fascinating. The preamble is the philosopher sitting on the edge of your bed explaining the diagnosis, and the law is the cop writing you the citation if you ignore it.
That's it perfectly.
It literally acts out the double law concept in its sentence structure.
And this entire linguistic architecture is held together by three specific Greek words that form the philosophical spine of the text. This is what we call lexical cohesion.
Right. The notes highlight these three terms. Let's walk through them because they are so central. The first is nomos.
Yes, nomos generally translates to law, custom, or convention. It's the external rule.
Got it. The second is psyche.
Psyche is the soul or the mind, but we have to be careful not to think of it like, a ghost in a machine.
Right, not the modern pop culture idea of a soul.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For the ancient Greeks, the psyche is the animating principle of the person. It's the seat of intellect, emotion, and moral character.
Okay. And the third word is sophrosyne. I struggle a bit with this one. It's usually translated as temperance, but what does that actually mean to an ancient Greek? Does it just mean not drinking too much wine?
It's much broader than that. Sophrosyne is soundness of mind. It's self-mastery, moderation, and the harmonious balance of the soul's desire.
Okay, so it's internal harmony.
It is the opposite of chaos and impulse.
Yeah.
So when you put these three terms together, you get the entire project of Plato's laws. The goal of the legislator is to use the nomos, the law, to properly order the soul so that the citizen achieves sophrosyne, temperance, and self-mastery.
And the bridge that makes that possible is the persuasive prelude.
Exactly. The prelude connects the law to the soul.
The elegance of that system is just staggering. He recognizes that you cannot mandate internal goodness. You can't just pass a law saying be temperate. You have to persuade the soul to accept the law so it willingly becomes temperate.
It's a brilliant, purely rational approach to human flourishing.
And this is a massive pivot here. While Plato was constructing this rational cathedral of law and philosophy in Athens, roughly around the same broad historical epoch, another ancient text was doing something remarkably similar, but it was building its system on a radically different foundation.
Yes.
Let's look at the bounded comparison the research provides between Plato's laws and the Old Testament, specifically the book of Deuteronomy.
This is where the comparative theology gets incredibly rich. First, we need to establish a disclaimer, though.
Right, nobody was copying anyone.
Exactly. There is zero historical evidence of literary borrowing here. Plato did not have a scroll of Moses on his desk, and the authors of Deuteronomy were not reading Platonic dialogues.
They were worlds apart.
But placing them side by side acts as a foil. It allows the distinct foundations of each text to come into much sharper relief.
And the structural parallels are impossible to ignore. I mean, in both texts, you have an aging leader delivering final instructions.
Moses and the Athenian Stranger.
Right. You have a people who are poised to enter and take possession of a new land. The hypothetical colony of Magnesia in Plato and the promised land of Canaan across the Jordan River in Deuteronomy.
The parallels are striking.
And both texts pair their legal codes with extended rationales. They don't just give bare commands. And most importantly, both are obsessed with the internal, heart-level disposition of the citizen, not just their external compliance.
Yes. The Hebrew word Torah itself is highly revealing here. We frequently translate it into English as law, which gives it a very rigid juridical feel.
Like a list of rules to follow.
Exactly. But Torah more accurately means instruction, teaching, or guidance. It possesses that pedagogical, heart-directed intention that Plato was aiming for with his preludes. The law of Moses is meant to teach the soul, not just punish the body.
I see this most clearly in Deuteronomy chapter 6, in the famous prayer known as the Shema.
Yes, the central prayer of Judaism.
It starts with, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might." It doesn't start with a list of penalties. It starts with a command to love.
And look at what immediately follows that command in the text. It instructs the Israelites to teach these words diligently to their children, to talk of them when sitting in their houses, when walking by the way, when lying down, and when rising up.
It's all-encompassing.
To bind them as signs on their hands. It is a picture of the Torah being completely interwoven into the daily domestic liturgy of life. It's not a legal code locked in a courthouse. It is the rhythm of the home.
So both Plato and Moses agree that the law has to reach the inner person. But how they attempt to reach that inner person is completely opposite.
Oh, fundamentally divergent.
The theological differences between the two texts are massive.
Let's look at how Plato handles theology. Because he is starting from absolute scratch, relying solely on human wisdom and observation, he has to reason his way to a theology.
He has to build it from the ground up.
Exactly. He spends pages and pages in Book 10 of the Laws building a complex metaphysical argument. He observes the movement of the stars, he tracks the self-moved motion of the soul, and he tries to logically deduce that the gods exist, that they're inherently good, and that they care about human affairs.
That's a lot of mental gymnastics.
He has to intellectually construct a theology just to justify why his citizens should obey his piety laws.
He has to build the ladder to heaven himself, basically, using only logic. But Moses doesn't do that at all.
No.
The Torah never starts with a philosophical proof of God's existence. It doesn't argue for intelligent design. It just starts with, in the beginning, God. It presupposes the Creator as the unshakable ground of all reality. Moses receives the theology as a revelation first, and the law flows downstream from it.
Which completely alters the motivation for obedience.
How so?
Well, in Plato's Magnesia, the legislator's ultimate motive is civic stability and rational self-interest.
Yeah.
You obey the persuasive prelude because it makes logical sense, and it is the most efficient way to maintain a functioning society.
It's pragmatic.
Highly pragmatic.
Yeah.
But in the Torah, the law is grounded in a historical redemptive act. God doesn't say, obey me because I am the cosmic prime mover.
Right.
He says, I am Yahweh your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery.
I really want to highlight this distinction because it changes everything about how a human being experiences authority. It's the difference between your boss coming to you and saying, hey, follow this new protocol because I've run the numbers and it optimizes our quarterly workflow by 12%.
A very platonic boss.
Exactly. And you might do it because it's logical. But contrast that with a close friend coming to you and saying, hey, remember 5 years ago when I pulled you out of a burning car and saved your life? I need you to trust me and do this thing I'm asking.
A completely different motivation.
Right. The first is based on abstract utility. The second is based on historical gratitude and a proven relationship.
That is precisely the dynamic at play. The Old Testament is saturated with this theological concept of cheesed.
Cheesed.
Yes. It translates roughly to steadfast, covenant love, or loving kindness. The law is given as a gracious instruction to a people who have already been redeemed.
They aren't trying to earn their salvation.
Right. They aren't obeying the law to earn their rescue from Egypt. They are obeying it as a response of gratitude for the rescue that already happened. You do not find Tonias anywhere in Plato's Magnesia.
That's a huge missing piece. And because the Torah views the law as a gift from a divine redeemer rather than, a construct of human philosophers, it views human power with deep suspicion. The research points out the Mishpatim, the case laws in Deuteronomy 17 regarding the future king of Israel.
That is a staggering piece of ancient literature. Centuries before Israel even establishes a monarchy, the law anticipates that they will demand a king to be like the surrounding nations.
We want a king too.
Exactly. But it places severe, almost crippling restrictions on him. He cannot multiply horses, which means he can't build a massive standing cavalry.
No huge army.
He cannot multiply wives to build foreign alliances. He cannot multiply extreme wealth for himself.
Which is basically a list of the 3 things every ancient king wanted to do.
Indeed. It's the standard king's starter pack. And most strikingly, he is required to personally write out a copy of the law and read it every single day of his life.
Why?
The text explicitly says, so that his heart may not be lifted up above his brothers.
That is radical. The king is not the source of the law. He is subjected to it, just like the poorest farmer, so he doesn't become an arrogant tyrant.
Exactly.
Plato's system doesn't have that built-in suspicion of human power. Because Plato fundamentally believes that if you educate the human intellect perfectly, if you create the perfect philosopher, they will rule perfectly. Plato trusts the power of human reason. The Torah absolutely does not.
Which brings us to the tragic limitation of Plato's entire project. He brilliantly diagnoses that the heart needs to be addressed. He invents the persuasive prelude to bridge the gap between the law and the soul.
Right?
But relying solely on unaided human reason to change the human heart inevitably hits an insurmountable wall.
And it is a very dark, violent wall. This transitions us perfectly to the ultimate blind spot of the laws and how the New Testament critiques this exact philosophical ceiling. We actually see the Apostle Paul engaging directly with this Greek philosophical tradition, don't we?
We do. If we look at Acts chapter 17, Paul is delivering a speech at the Areopagus in Athens.
Which is the very epicenter of Greek philosophy.
Yes. And Paul does not mock them. He actually praises the insights of their natural theology. He quotes their own Greek poets, like Aratus, saying, "In him we live and move and have our being."
He's finding common ground.
Exactly. This is language that the Athenian stranger from the laws would have enthusiastically agreed with. Paul is validating that human reason can deduce the existence of a creator and the divine cosmic order.
And Paul expands on this in his letter to the Romans in chapters 1 and 2. He talks about Gentiles who don't have the Mosaic law, but physei, by nature, they do what the law requires because the work of the law is written on their hearts. Plato is the ultimate example of this. He figured out so much about justice, temperance, and the order of the soul just by using his intellect and observing the universe.
He is the pinnacle of natural revelation.
Yeah.
But, and this is the crucial pivot in Paul's theology, Paul's argument in Romans is ultimately an indictment, not a congratulatory speech. He argues that although humanity knew God through what was made, they did not honor him or give thanks, and their thinking became futile. Natural revelation is enough to make us accountable to the moral law, but it is not enough to save us or transform our nature.
And this is where the tragedy of Plato's laws comes into full devastating focus.
Yeah.
Because for all of his beautiful rhetoric about being the free doctor, and for all of his elegant, cognitively engaging, persuasive preludes, what happens when a citizen in Magnesia listens to the philosopher, understands the argument, and simply says, no, I'm not persuaded, I'm going to do what I want?
The entire system breaks down. Because philosophy has no mechanism to force a change of heart. When persuasion fails, Magnesia reverts to coercion.
Right.
It terminates in an institution called the Nocturnal Council.
Okay, wait. The Nocturnal Council. That sounds incredibly sinister. Who is on this council, and why do they meet at night?
They meet at night because they are the philosophical watchmen, guarding the city while the ordinary citizens sleep.
Of course they do.
It consists of the eldest and most educated magistrates, and they operate somewhat like an inquisitorial board. If a citizen commits impiety, if they deny the state's theology or reject the preludes, Plato's law does not offer grace.
No second chances.
Well, there is a process. It mandates that the citizen be thrown into a prison called the sophronisterion.
The sophronisterion. What does that translate to?
It translates roughly to the house of chastisement, or essentially a re-education center.
Wait, so it ends in a re-education camp?
Yes, for a mandatory 5 years.
5 years.
And during those 5 years, no citizen is allowed to speak to them except the members of the Nocturnal Council, who visit them to continually try and force philosophical persuasion upon them.
Oh my goodness. And if, after 5 years of solitary confinement and philosophical lectures, the citizen still refuses to give their internal assent, what happens then?
The penalty is death. They are executed.
That is chilling. He builds this massive, beautiful cathedral of logic. He argues for human dignity. He wants to persuade the mind. He wants to avoid treating citizens like slaves.
Right.
But at the very center of this utopia is an executioner's block for anyone who doesn't agree with the logic.
Because he has no other option. Human law, no matter how beautifully written, no matter how perfectly the grammar shifts from inquiry to imperative, cannot actually regenerate the human heart. It can only threaten the body.
That is the insurmountable ceiling of unaided human wisdom. We see this mirrored in the New Testament, where Paul writes in 1 Timothy 1:9 that the law is not laid down for the just, but for the lawless. And the wild thing is, Plato actually agrees with this. In Book 9 of the Laws, he explicitly laments that if citizens were truly virtuous, laws would be entirely unnecessary. But he doesn't have a mechanism to make them virtuous from the inside out.
He can only regulate them from the outside in. And this is exactly where the biblical narrative offers the solution that Plato was desperately searching for, but could never legislate into existence.
Right.
The biblical answer to human selfishness is not a better lawgiver. It's not a more mathematically perfect city plan or more persuasive preamble. It is the promise of a new covenant, where the Holy Spirit is sent to write the law on the heart from within.
Instead of threatening the citizen with death to force a change of mind, it relies on a divine intervention that changes the desires of the heart.
Yes. And this internal transformation is accompanied by the New Testament call to metanoin,
Meaning to repent.
repentance. But not just feeling sorry. Metanoin literally means a complete change of mind and heart. But crucially, in the biblical framework, this repentance is granted as a gift of grace.
It's not earned.
Right. It is the result of divine love cheesed rather than being forced through 5 years of isolation and the threat of execution by a nocturnal council. Plato's ultimate failure in the laws is the definitive proof that even the greatest philosophical mind in human history cannot engineer human goodness through policy and penal codes alone.
Wow. Okay, we've covered an immense amount of ground today. We walked from Knossos to the cave of Zeus in the sweltering heat. We looked at ancient doctors, the linguistic shifts of the Greek text, the difference between reasoned theology and revealed theology, and the tragic limits of philosophy. So as we wrap up, what does this all mean for us today?
I think there are two main takeaways here. First, we should deeply appreciate Plato's genius. He taught us the profound value of being the free doctor, of respecting human dignity enough to give reasons alongside our rules. If you are leading a corporate team, teaching a classroom of students, or raising a family, taking the time to persuade the mind, rather than just demanding blind compliance, is a profoundly better, more humanizing way to operate. He understood the power of shaping habits, offering rationales, and engaging the intellect.
But it also leaves us with a stark warning. And this is the provocative thought I want to leave you, the listener, with today, as you mull over everything we've discussed. Look at our modern society.
Yeah.
We have, thankfully, mostly abandoned the brutal penalties of Plato's Book 10. We don't execute people for bad theology or throw them into 5-year philosophical re-education camps.
At least not where we live.
Right. But we still operate under the exact same illusion that Plato did. We still secretly believe that if we just draft the perfect public policy, or write the perfect corporate mission statement, or elect the perfect lawmaker, we can engineer human goodness. We think we can fix the fundamental brokenness of the human condition with better paperwork and better arguments.
It's a very tempting illusion.
It is. But if Plato, the greatest philosopher of the ancient world, a man who dedicated his entire existence to the pursuit of justice and temperance, if he ultimately realized that even the best, most persuasive laws run out of power at the edge of the human heart, maybe we need to ask ourselves a harder question. What are we trusting to do the internal work that the law simply cannot do?
Because the law will always fall short.
Exactly, because at the end of the day, when the arguments fail and the policies fall short, we are all just like that elderly man, sitting alone in the shade, desperately scribbling our hopes onto wax tablets, waiting for something or someone to change us from the inside out.
A powerful thought to end on.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We'll catch you on the next one.